I want you to think about the last date that you went on where you felt like it was going really well. You were engaged, you were funny, the conversation was flowing. And at the end of the night, some part of you thought, all right, okay, that was a solid performance. Sit with that word for a second. Performance. Because I think that just told you something very important. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to Stripped, Drop Your Patterns. I'm Rachel J, and I am really glad you're here with me today. Whether you're new to the show or you've been with me for a while, thank you. You ready for this one? I think it will explain a lot. Let's go. Throw out the rules, forget the cliches. This isn't about the perfect profile or the perfect date. It's about real connection. It's time to strip away the masks, shed the stories, and drop those old patterns that no longer serve you. Tired of dating advice that doesn't fit? So are we. Welcome to Stripped, Drop Your Patterns, where conscious dating isn't about following a script. It's about embracing your whole self and attracting the kind of love that sets your soul on fire. I'm Rachel J, the connection coach and your host. Let's get real. Today's episode is for the person who has genuinely built a good life. Career, check. Apartment, check. Fitness, travel, the whole thing, handled. In dating, not handled. Well, not in the same way anyway. If that's you, or if you love someone who fits that description, I want to offer something today that I think reframes the whole picture. Because one of the patterns I see most often in my work, with high-achieving men specifically, isn't that they're doing the wrong things. It's that they're doing the right things, just in the wrong context. The skills that built the career, the ones that earned the respect and the results, are the same skills that are quietly making real connection harder. And I mean this with genuine compassion because this isn't about being flawed, it's about being trained, exceptionally trained, for one environment in a way that doesn't automatically transfer to another. Dating and intimacy require something fundamentally different than the professional world does. And most people are never told that. They're just expected to figure it out, which is a little wild when you think about it, given how much it matters in your overall happiness and life satisfaction. So today we're looking at 6 specific ways that crossover happens, and I'm also going to give you a sense of how I work with this with my clients. Because understanding a pattern is one thing, but actually being able to shift it is something else entirely. And just one more thing before we dive in, this episode is going to speak directly to my men, but if you're a woman listening, I want you to stay with me too, because what we're unpacking can genuinely change how you see the men that you've dated, the ones who maybe felt checked out or distant or just hard to reach. Understanding what's underneath that isn't about making excuses for it. It's about having compassion for a conditioning that most men didn't choose and were never given the tools to question. And that kind of understanding changes how you show up in dating too. And it makes everything less personal. All right, let's get into it. I want to tell you about a client. And again, for the sake of privacy, we'll rename him and call him Derek. Derek came to me after ending yet another relationship that had started out with real promise. He was in his mid-30s, successful in finance, genuinely warm and funny underneath the surface that he had built. He was the kind of person who, once you knew him, you would probably wonder, wow, how is this guy still single? And I want to make a very important quick side note here. Please do not ever ask anyone that question, male or female, because while it's usually intended as a compliment, like, you're so amazing, I just can't believe you haven't been snatched yet, it's often received as, you seem amazing. What's wrong with you that you haven't been snatched yet? You hear the difference? All right, back to Derek. Every relationship that he had had in the last several years had ended somewhere around the 4 or 5 month mark, and always with some version of the same feedback. I feel like I can't quite reach you. I don't feel a connection. Now, when Derek first started describing his approach to dating, it was actually pretty fascinating. And I mean that in the most affectionate way, because he sounded like he was walking me through a very strategic plan. He'd thought carefully about what he was looking for. He had a mental checklist of attributes he wanted to assess, was tracking signals in conversation to determine whether a date was, going well. He had a whole system, which honestly makes complete sense. He was a systems guy. That's how his brain worked, and it had served him extraordinarily well in his career. But here's the thing about dating apps, and Tinder being the original really crystallized this. Apps were literally designed to feel like a game. Swipe right, get a match, dopamine hit. Track your response rate, optimize your photos, A/B test your opening line. The whole architecture was built to reward the exact skills that high performers already have: strategy, efficiency, pattern recognition, outcome tracking. So men like Derek didn't just stumble into gamifying dating. They were handed a platform that actively encouraged it. The problem is that the game mechanics and the actual goal are completely at odds with each other. You can win at the app and still be no closer to real connection. So I asked Derek about 3 sessions in, when you're on a date with a woman that you're actually attracted to, what are you thinking about? He paused, and then he said, whether I'm making a good impression. That's the whole thing right there. Derek was so practiced at managing how he came across in the boardroom, in client relationships, in every high-stakes professional context, that it had become his default, completely unconscious. He'd show up to a date fully intending to be present, and his nervous system would quietly activate the performance protocol it had been running for 20 or so years, monitoring, adjusting, optimizing. And the women sitting across from him could feel that something was slightly off, even if they couldn't quite name it. So they'd end up saying, well, I just didn't feel a real connection, which is true. There wasn't one. And it was not because Derek wasn't trying, but because he just wasn't fully there. The part of him that knew how to just be with someone hadn't really been given permission to show up yet. When I gently reflected this back to him, because of course this is tender territory, something visibly shifted. And it wasn't defensiveness, it was recognition. Like he'd always known that something wasn't translating, and this was the first time someone had given him language for it that didn't make him feel like the villain of the story. That's usually where the real work begins. So let me walk you through the 6 patterns that I see most consistently. And as I do, I want you to just notice which ones land for you. And it's not to judge yourself for them. These patterns exist because they worked somewhere at some point, and they probably still work today. They are adaptive. The invitation is just to see them clearly and be mindful of the context in which you use them. The first one is emotional compartmentalization. In high-stakes professional environments, the ability to keep your feelings out of your decisions is genuinely valuable. You stay composed under pressure, you don't let nerves show in a pitch, you can hold a difficult conversation without your emotions running the room. It's a real skill, and it does serve a real purpose. In dating and intimacy, however, that same capacity can read as unavailable. Not necessarily cold, because you're not a cold person, but unreachable in a specific way that makes it hard for someone to feel like they're actually getting to know you. They sense something being held back, even if they can't articulate what. In my work with my clients, we start here, not by dismantling the compartmentalization, but by learning when to set it down. There's a difference between emotional regulation and emotional absence, and most men have just never been shown that line. The second one is the problem-solving instinct. When someone you care about is upset, the immediate impulse is to help fix it, which is genuinely an act of care, and I want to really name that clearly. The intent is almost always love. But what most people actually need in a vulnerable or emotional moment is just to feel heard before anything else, to feel like their experience is being witnessed and not immediately triaged. Jumping to conclusions, even very good ones, can land as, I want this to stop, can we move on now? Rather than, I'm here with you however long you need. And that creates distance at exactly the moment that someone was hoping to feel close. Now, this is a learning curve in most relationships that is ongoing. In my own relationship with my beloved, it took quite a long time, and transparently, even still today, gentle reminders that when I share a personal challenge or a decision that I'm trying to make, I'm not asking for a solution or even feedback unless I specifically ask for one. Because what happens is I'll share whatever's coming up for me, and his immediate response is often, I don't have an answer for that right now, let me think about it. And I will remind him that I'm not looking for an answer. I only am intending to share what I've got going on so as to bring him into my thought process. It's important for men to feel useful and needed and like the protector. It's been coded into your DNA since the caveman era. There's nothing wrong with that, except when it overtakes a conversation and blocks the connection. In early dating, it's pretty common that you might run into dead air, and women may share challenges that they're facing at work or elsewhere to spark conversation and maybe even a new level of vulnerability. So unless they ask for solutions, they are only looking for you to see them, to learn a bit more about them through the story that they're sharing, and just respond with compassion. And this is a core lesson that I learned in my Cuddleist certification process, because the impulse to advise is not exclusive to men, and opinions are like assholes, right? When clients seek a supportive service like Cuddleist, we are there to witness and hold space for clients to share without feeling like they're going to be told what they should do. So in my Cuddleist sessions and in my coaching work, I first respond with, "I hear you," or "Thank you for sharing that with me." I'm affirming what my client shared with me, what they're feeling, without assuming that they want advice. This builds trust and gives them space to decide if they want to say more on the topic without feeling rushed or shut down. They may explicitly ask for my feedback, or I will ask if they are available for feedback, but I don't assume and I don't jump in. So if you have a tendency to want to offer solutions or fix what you perceive as someone's problem, I invite you to pause and reflect. Literally just train yourself to take a breath and mirror back what you heard before you do anything else. It sounds almost embarrassingly simple, but the shift it creates in whether the other person feels connected to you is not. You'll likely even feel relieved that the pressure to problem solve is removed. You problem solve all day. Wouldn't it be nice to take that hat off and simply engage with a new person sitting across from you? The third one is persona management. Managing your image in professional context isn't just acceptable, it's expected. You've spent years learning how to project confidence, competence, authority, and it genuinely works in the context that it was built for. However, on a date, that same energy creates a subtle but real barrier. The person across from you might be charmed, maybe even attracted, but they're relating to a version of you that's been curated for effect rather than the one who actually lives inside all of that. And somewhere, even if they can't name it, they may feel the difference between being with someone and watching someone perform. Those two things have really different textures. What I work on with clients here is less about dropping the persona wholesale and more about finding the places where the real person is already there, ready to come through, and just letting that happen more. It's incremental and it doesn't require a personality transplant. It just requires permission. The fourth one is outcome orientation. That instinct to track results, to monitor whether something is quote unquote going well, to stay focused on the destination, this is just simply wired into high performers and for good reason. In most arenas, it leads to better outcomes. In a date or developing relationship, it introduces a kind of ambient pressure that the other person can feel even if they can't name it. When the attention is partially on the outcome rather than fully on the person, the dynamic shifts from encounter to evaluation. And people, women especially in my experience, are very attuned to that shift. It's not that they're being difficult, it's that being evaluated feels different than being seen, and they know which one is happening. Anyone who's been dating for a long time has experienced dates that feel like interviews. They are not enjoyable and they do not lead to second dates. The reframe I offer clients here is a simple one. What would it feel like to go on a date with no agenda other than genuine curiosity about this person? Not, is this going well, but what's interesting about them right now? It sounds small, yet it completely changes the room. The fifth one is how rejection gets processed. High performers are trained to treat setbacks as data. You fail, then you extract the lesson, you adjust, and you move forward. It's no big deal. And in most contexts, this is incredibly healthy and adaptive. In dating, rejection can bypass that framework and hit somewhere much more personal, somewhere that's less about the interaction and more about sense of worth. And when that happens, the response tends to go one of two directions, either pulling back and playing it very, very safe, or pushing harder to try to win the dynamic back. Both of those responses make sense as self-protection, but neither of them creates the conditions for genuine connection. The thing that I try to help men understand, and this is usually the reframe that shifts the most, is that rejection in dating is almost never a verdict. It's almost always a simple mismatch. Two people with different wiring, different readiness, different emotional availability. It's not evidence of your worth or desirability. I'm going to say that again. It is not evidence of your worth or desirability. It's simply data. It's data about the fit, compatibility, misaligned interests, values, goals, or boundaries. That's all. And once that actually lands in the body and not just in the head, the whole experience of dating starts to feel less like a test. And the sixth one is status signaling. Leading with your accomplishments in professional settings makes sense. It's how credibility gets established quickly. But in dating, and specifically with the kind of woman who's genuinely worth your time and attention, that same move tends to land differently than intended. It often reads as anxiety about whether you're enough, dressed up as confidence. And it keeps the conversation at the level of your resume when the conversation she's hoping to have is happening several layers deeper than that. This is usually the gentlest pattern to work with, honestly, because once men see it, they're often a little bit relieved. The pressure to lead with your credentials is exhausting, but letting it go feels like setting something down that you didn't even realize you were carrying. Here's what I want to name clearly before we move on, because I think it matters. None of these 6 patterns makes you a failure at dating. None of them are character flaws. Every single one of them is the result of being trained consistently and from a young age to operate a specific way in a specific set of environments. The career operating system, performance-based, outcome-oriented, controlled, is genuinely brilliant for external results. But my friend, love is an inside game, and nobody teaches you that. You're just expected to know it or figure it out, which is a little absurd when you think about how much is riding on it. What we've been talking about today isn't dismantling who you are. It's recognizing that you have a second operating system available to you, one that's been waiting, honestly, probably for a long time, and learning how to run it in the context where it actually serves you. So what's the practical takeaway? I want to offer you one concept and one practice. The concept is presence over performance. These are genuinely different states, and learning to feel the difference between them in your body is one of the most valuable things you can develop. Performance is when part of your attention is on how you're coming across. Presence is when all of your attention is on what's actually happening in front of you, what she just said, what you're actually feeling, what's alive in the room. You cannot fake presence. You may try, but people feel it. And when you're genuinely present with someone, the dynamic shifts in a way that no amount of charm or strategy can manufacture. You stop being someone she's trying to read and start being someone she wants to stay close to. The practice is what I call the gut check. About 15 minutes into a date or any conversation that matters, just pause for half a second internally and notice, where is my attention right now? Is it on her? On what she's actually saying? On what's happening between us? Or is it on me? On how I'm landing? On whether this is going well? On what I should say next? There's no judgment in the question. It's just noticing. Because the noticing is where the shift begins. You genuinely cannot change what you can't see, and most people have been running this loop so unconsciously for so long that awareness alone creates a meaningful shift. Not a complete one. I want to be honest about that because, as we've talked about, neural patterns do not rewire overnight, but a real one, something that builds over time. That is neuroplasticity. Brain changes through consistent, repeated new choices. Every time you catch the performance loop and redirect toward presence, you're laying down new wiring, slowly, genuinely, and for real. I want to invite you into a quick version of this right now. And of course, if you're driving, keep your eyes on the road. Just let this land wherever it lands. Take one slow breath and ask yourself, in the last relationship or the last dating experience that didn't go the way you hoped, when you were on a date with that person, where was most of your mental energy? On them? On what was actually happening between you? Or on yourself? On how you were coming across or whether it was working? Just notice. No story about it, no verdict, because whatever you noticed is just information about where your attention has been trained to go. And attention, it turns out, is absolutely something that you can retrain. What I want to leave you with today is this. The gap between where you are and the kind of connection you actually want is not a character gap. It's just a skills gap. And as you, my high achiever, knows, skills can be learned. The version of you who can walk into a boardroom and own it, and also sit across from someone and just be there with them, fully, honestly, without the performance layer running in the background, that version of you is not a distant aspiration. He's actually pretty close. He just needs the right conditions and the right tools to come through. Now, we've covered all 6 patterns today, and my guess is that 1 or 2 of them landed harder than the others. Like you heard it and you thought, yeah, okay, that resonates. But maybe several resonated, and now you're unsure where to start. If you want to get specific about which pattern is most active for you, I created a quiz for exactly that. It's called Which Career Pattern is Running My Life? And it takes just about 3 minutes, super quick and easy. At the end, you'll get your primary pattern, what is actually costing you in relationships, and a clear sense of where to start. I will link it, of course, in the show notes. And if you're at a point where you're ready to do more than just identify the pattern, if you want to actually start rewiring it, that is what Magnetic is for. It's my 6-week self-guided program built specifically around this work. It's not more tactics. It's not tips to optimize your profile. It's a genuine rewire. We trace where the patterns came from, start dissolving the ones that aren't serving you anymore, and build something new from the inside out, at your pace, in your own time, with the kind of depth that actually moves the needle. The waitlist is waiting for you to put your name on it, and of course that link is also in the show notes. Now, in closing, if this episode resonated, please do share it with a friend, with a woman who's trying to understand the man in her life, with a brother or colleague who you think would feel seen by it. This conversation matters, and the more people who are having it, the stronger their relationships will be. Until next time, I'm Rachel J, and this is Stripped. Drop your patterns. Bye for now.